on the cloud. All right. All right. So welcome to our study of the book of Ruth and how to be more Ruthful. I hope that that title maybe piqued your interest, because the the word ruthless, of course, means like merciless and cruel. So ruthful, it should mean merciful. Apparently, I looked it up, and apparently it kind of means pitiful, but it could mean merciful. And that's the sense I mean it. Be full of compassion and full of caring and mercy, instead of, the kind of coldness that we sometimes find in the world today. 1 second. So first of all, what is this whole custom of studying for Shavuot? It's called Tikkun Leil Shavuot, which is it's like a tikkun is like a repair, like Tikkun Olam. We learned about Tikkun Olam, right? So there's a repair that we need to do on Shavuot. And that has been explained in the fact that when the Israelites, the Torah says when the Israelites were ready to receive the Torah, it was like God had to kind of wake them up to do it. And the implication being in the Midrash that they had dozed off, they overslept on the biggest day of their collective lives. And so as a tikkun, as a repair to that, we are supposed to be up all night studying. Of course, that explanation probably came about pretty late in Jewish history, maybe a mere 500 years ago. And it was kind of a Kabbalistic custom that the mystics saw Shavuot in the Zohar, the great book of Jewish mysticism. They saw it as a divine wedding. Shavuot is this divine wedding between God and our people, and the Torah is like our ketubah, and Mount Sinai kind of like our canopy, and Moses like the Badchen, and they say in Yiddish, he was kind of like the MC of the whole wedding. So anyway, they felt that we were adorning the bride with the Torah with all kinds of jewels by the study of the Torah, and adorning the divine presence herself with the jewels of studying Torah. But apparently, in a practical sense, this really took off about 500 years ago to study Torah all night on Erev Shavuot, because coffee became widely available in Europe, and people could drink coffee and stay up all night. But personally, it's been a long time since I did anything like that, so I do not stay up all night. But I wonder if anyone here has ever stayed up, done one of those all-night things for Shavuot. Jeffrey has. How recently, Jeffrey? You want to tell us?
Probably 2 or 3 years ago was the last time I did it.
Online.
Well, there was some, during the pandemic, that was one of the cool things. There were a lot of these all-night studies online. So I did participate in at least part of one.
No.
And it seems like no one's doing them anymore. They did them even last year, and this year it's all gone back to in person, which is good, but.
I'm sorry.
Alan, go ahead.
Yeah, Andrea, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, Al and I made it to midnight once.
Okay. You're not night owls. No. I think I'm kind of a night owl, but being up all night, I'm too old for that. So anyway, it's quite an experience. And for me, just to the fact that we're studying a little later than usual, it gives us a bit of that flavor. In my community back in California, I know they are doing an all-night Torah study at the rabbi's house, and we'll see how that goes for them. So I thought that was kind of cool. But anyway, we're going to look today, though, at the book of Ruth. So I'm going to share my screen. Of course, I have a PowerPoint, all right, let me put this. Well, what I found, hopefully I can show you this without getting bumped off the Zoom. Do you remember when I was teaching large classes, I found that when I shared my screen, suddenly I got bumped off Zoom. But hopefully we're kind of smaller group and it won't bump me. Well, so again, how to be more Ruthful. Shavuot Torah study. Here's the prayer for the study of Torah. And I invite you to say it with me if you'd like, or to say amen, or just take it in. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. You made us holy with mitzvot and bid us to engage with words of Torah. So why did I pick the book of Ruth? Well, mainly Andrea Hoffman asked me if I would do it because they're learning in Hebrew class. But seriously, that was a great choice because, in fact, it is traditional to, over the holiday, to chant the book of Ruth and to learn the book of Ruth because Ruth represents, in rabbinic tradition, the first convert to Judaism who accepted the Torah. And we all became like Jews by choice when we received the Torah at Sinai, although there's a little discussion of how much choice we really had, but we won't get into that tonight. If you did the whole Tikkun Leil Shavuot all night, the traditional way to do it is to go through like all the kind of a little bit of everything from the Torah to the rabbinic literature, and you just learning a little, it's kind of ritualistic, but of course in modern times it's become just learning whatever's relevant to you. So I think this is a very relevant book, and especially because we are in a kind of time where we don't have enough Ruth, in the sense of we don't seem to have enough kindness and just, you know, compassion, and I think that's something the book of Ruth represents. So before we look at some main points about the book of Ruth, first of all, the exciting news is we can read the whole book during this study because it's only 4 chapters long and they're short chapters. I'm going to put it on the screen in English and ask different people to read a chapter, and we'll discuss each one. And I have some slides, and I spent some time discussing it with Jeffrey Rosen because he really likes teaching it, and you gave me some great ideas that I really built on him. So that just proves that learning Torah works best when you learn it with other people. But just raise your hand if you've read the book of Ruth before. No judgments here. Okay. So some people are kind of, it's been a while. So I'm going to give you a summary of it, and then we'll do it like chapter by, and then some main points to look at as we read it, and then we'll read it chapter by chapter. And then we'll get deeper into a few of the points, right? And some of the ideas, including spreading your wings and what that really means. Okay, so how it all goes. So I found this on a website called Shmoop University. I don't really know what it is, but it was a very lighthearted way to describe the book of Ruth. How it all goes down. Our story opens on a nice Jewish family with a problem. Famine has hit Bethlehem, which forces Elimelech and his wife Naomi to move east to Moab with their 2 sons to get some grub. There they set up shop, eat some food, and live for about 10 years. The sons marry 2 local girls, Ruth and Orpah, the one with the talk show. No, not Oprah, Orpah. During this time, and life is good, or so it seems. One by one, Elimelech and his 2 sons die. Bummer. This leaves Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah manless and in need of help. Naomi decides to head back to Bethlehem. 10 years is enough time to get over a famine, right? And her daughters-in-law pack their luggage and join her. Naomi begs the girls to stay behind, and while Orpah is convinced and hightails it back to Moab, Ruth pledges her devotion to Naomi, forsaking her God and her people to become part of Naomi's life. Ruth's stubbornness pays off, and Naomi lets her tag along. In Bethlehem, things are not too good for the ladies. Naomi is feeling down and out, and Ruth is reduced to gleaning in the barley fields. In other words, she picks up all the leftover produce that gets dropped in the field, and we'll learn about that if you're not familiar. There, Ruth happens to run into a well-known rich guy named Boaz, who instantly takes a liking to her and offers her all kinds of sweet gleaning privileges. Boaz also happens to be a relative of Naomi's late husband, which is very, very important, since Boaz would have an obligation to marry Ruth and provide for her as family. When Naomi hears about Boaz and what a stand-up guy he is, she hatches a plan for Ruth to snag him as a husband. She tells her daughter-in-law to visit Boaz at night in secret and lie at his feet. It's sexy, trust us. Ruth does what her mother-in-law asks, and Boaz is pleasantly surprised to see the cute girl from the fields is interested in him. He tells Ruth he would love to marry her, but there's another relative with even closer ties to her in-laws. Boaz sets out to meet the guy, and everyone is left to hold their breath while we wait to find out whom Ruth will end up with. As it turns out, this random relative is interested in buying some land that Naomi has. He's much less interested in taking her daughter-in-law as his wife. So a deal is struck. The other guy renounces his claim on Ruth, and Boaz is free to marry her. Wedding bells start ringing, and everyone's happy. Soon Ruth and Boaz have a son, which makes Naomi uber happy. The women in town name the baby Obed, and surprise, surprise, he goes on to be the grandfather of King David. who we heard so much about from Eric Dorsey, who literally wrote the book on King David, talk about a happy ending. So I think, I don't know, I'm going to tell Rabbi secrets. There's a saying, Nichnas yain yatsa sod, a little wine goes in, a little secret comes out. I found that during the pandemic, I don't mean like steamy romance novels, just the kind of light romance novels, chick literature goes down very easy. Sometimes I get tired of hearing the news and I want a little chick lit. And Ruth is basically, could be called the chick lit of the Bible. Why? Well, we're going to see again on my screen. What's Ruth about? Here we go. Okay, here's some perspectives to think about when we're reading Ruth. So again, I want to start with, okay. Yeah. Okay, so Ruth is the chick lit of the Bible. What do I mean by that? It really is I think it's there's only 2 books named after women, Esther and Ruth. And it's about women's themes. The main characters are 2 women. The men are sort of peripheral. We'll see with Boaz, even though he's important, it's Naomi and Ruth who are at the center. Their friendship is very, very important. And as one of my textbooks on the Old Testament, Michael Coogan said, Naomi and Ruth are the bonds between Naomi and Ruth are deeper than those of ethnicity or religion. Together, they manipulate the patriarchal system to their mutual advantage. From such stock, the narrator concludes, Israel's greatest king, King David, was born. So we find that women are in a man's world, much as in the book of Esther, but as we were told in the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, the man is the head of the household and the woman is the neck, but the neck turns the head. The women behind the scenes, not in the public sphere, the women, just like a Jane Austen novel, are in fact in their conversations planning and deciding how things are going to turn out. And in fact, it's interesting that this book has the most dialogue of any biblical book. About 2/3 of the book is dialogue, which is very unusual. So I said, hello, Jane Austen. If you read Jane Austen, there's a lot of dialogue. And of course, like any good romance novel, there is a happy ending, which is a marriage and a baby and every, that's the comedic genre when it ends with a wedding and not after a battle or something. So it's all good in that way. That's one way to look at the book of Ruth, but I wanted to offer you a couple of different ways. So as we start to read it, you can see the framework that you want to look at the book of Ruth in. Another way to look at the book of Ruth, other than chick lit, is the ideal of pastoral life, kindness, loyalty, and friendship, and being Ruthful. Because unlike so many episodes in the Bible and too much in real life, we see people really behaving well instead of behaving badly. People caring for the stranger, welcoming them, doing their duty, looking out for one another. We see a young woman who maybe who is loyal to her mother-in-law, an older woman, and doesn't want to forsake her. And you just see a lot of good behavior. And that's what seems kind of a balm to the time we live in. So we might look at that as we look at the book. Third, we could say that Ruth, and I think this is so interesting and important, Ruth, we could say, is a polemic for welcoming the stranger, right? Because, we know that the most often repeated message in the Torah, the most often repeated mitzvah in the Torah is to love the stranger, or to know the heart of the stranger, or to look out for the stranger, the ger, the person who's different, or you could say stranger as in a foreigner or a refugee, somebody that's not in their homeland. And yet we'll see some other messages that show that maybe strangers weren't so welcome, not to the level of marriage and really being welcomed into the tribe. And we'll see that in another book of the Bible, some people think that Ruth was written as a polemic against the message of the book of Ezra, in which Ezra and Nehemiah, rebuilding the second temple in the 5th century before the Common Era, banished foreign women. Ezra the scribe is horrified that Israelites were marrying out of the faith, and he has them all divorce divorce their wives of came from other tribes and send them away with the kids. He didn't give them an opportunity to convert or anything like that. And then we have a totally different situation in the book of Ruth, where someone who's an outsider is welcome, not only welcome, she's this paragon of virtue, and she becomes the great grandmother, I think, of King David. She's the ancestress of King David. All right, well, we'll look at that more in depth later. So as I mentioned, Ruth became the paradigm of the Jew by choice. And we read her story on Shavuot. And I remember in Israel that there's often profiles of like Jews by choice. In the newspaper, people are interviewed. Why did you become a Jew by choice? Because this is like the holiday of Jews by choice, since it's the holiday of the giving of the Torah. So that's another thing. But and in a more daring way, we could say maybe it's even really showing a positive side of intermarriage and what could come out of it. I don't know if traditional rabbis would say that, but when I look at it afresh, I wonder. Okay, then we have number 4. Ruth is a story of growth and resilience after grief. Because I heard our friend Reb Simcha Raphael, who came last year for my, if you remember, he came for my installation. He's taught that the book of Ruth really is this model of people that are dealing with terrible grief. Naomi's husband died and her 2 sons died, and she feels empty and bereft, obviously, as she goes back home and feel, and there's a story of how she copes and how the people around her cope and how they end up really starting life new and reaffirming life. And lastly, of course, Ruth is the origin story of the Davidic line, because it shows the ancestry of David, who was known to have some kind of Moabite ancestry. And maybe Eric, you can feel free to pipe up about this, and Jeffrey's going to talk about it a little bit later on in the evening, that we have to explain who did King David come from. So this is like his origin story. Scholars don't, of course, some scholars don't think that this book is just simply historical. It seems more polemical, maybe fictional, but it definitely has a very strong message. So I'm going to stop my share there. So that's like introduction to Ruth. And I'd like to be able to, first, before we go any further, just open it up. If you have already studied the book of Ruth, or if you're coming here with a question about the book of Ruth, since we have a small group, I think you can feel free to just share it, something that you wanted to share as we begin, or that you came, interested in learning about tonight. And you can put in the chat if you want, or you can just unmute and say it if there's any thoughts about Ruth.
I was always impressed by what a strong person Ruth was. I mean, here she was, without a guy in her life, but she's very dependent. She's very resourceful.
Right. I think she and Naomi, I mean, it shows female strength and female, I kind of like in the book of Esther. It's like as if it starts out very patriarchal, right? And yet you see that women have a very key role to play, and they have a lot of strength and courage. Anybody else come in with anything, or either a question or a comment? Okay.
My mother name is Ruth.
Okay.
She was just like that. Very strong, independent woman. So that's why I tuned in.
Oh, good. Good. Maybe it's a kind of a way to connect to her, isn't it?
My mother's name was Ruth as well.
Sorry?
I said my mother's name was Ruth.
Oh. Well, maybe we'll dedicate our learning to the mother's name Ruth, and also to Avram's parents that have their yahrzeit tonight, Mazel and Sion, and those parents as we study. Okay.
And the second,
Elaine?
Yeah. Well, yes, you do. My mother's name is Ruth, and
oh my goodness, must be a very popular name in a certain generation.
Yeah. I guess one thing I kind of looked it up a little bit before we came in tonight, and what I discovered, you talk about kindness, compassion. My mother was always been like that. And she's also a social butterfly. She always has been. She's always been very caring. And I guess that's what's gotten her this far. She was just 97 this week.
Oh, good.
And yes, and she looks great, but she's got a, she's fine. But
Okay.
but she's always been there. She's always been there, and she's done a world for a lot of people. Yeah.
Well, I think that the fact that a lot of people are saying, hey, my mom's named Ruth, it shows that these stories are very alive in Jewish tradition. The fact that the names are carried on with a story that's supposed to date back like more than 3,000 years, right? And the names themselves all have meanings. So remind me if I don't tell you the meaning of the name. Although Ruth, I don't think it's quite as clear what it means, but now we know what it means in English, right? But Naomi, for example, means pleasant. And her two sons, Machlon and Chilayom, means something like, it's literally something like sickness and death, because it's foreshadowing. And Boaz means he's got some strong things. He's strong, right? Strength. So the names were symbolic and had a meaning. And I'm going to share the story now in English, but there are some interesting things in Hebrew. I'll try to remember and point them out. And if you have it in Hebrew, feel free to refer to that too. I'm going to go on Safaria is it .com or .org? Let's see. Safaria.org, which is, in case you're not familiar, it's an amazing website which has kind of every Jewish text, just about every Jewish text available for free online in Hebrew and English. The only reason I put it up only in English is just for simplicity, because I think if I put it in Hebrew and English, it's a little harder to follow it. It's a very short story, and the book of Ruth is in the third part of the Tanakh that we call the writings. We have the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, which has all the stories of going, not only the prophets like Isaiah, they're reading the Haftarah, but a lot of the historical books of the Bible. And the last section of the Jewish Bible, of the Tanakh, is the Ketuvim, the writings, which has all these miscellaneous books. It's like a little library with the Psalms, the Proverbs, the Song of Songs, Lamentations, Ecclesiastes, and Ruth is one of them. It's not the same in Christian Bibles, where they try to position it to highlight, the ancestry of guess who, of, their messianic figure of Jesus, who's supposed to be a descendant of King David. So, but for Jews, it's put near the end of the Bible. All right, so who would like to read chapter 1, and then we'll discuss chapter 1. Somebody could read it for us. You'll have to, I can't see everybody, so just unmute and speak up so I can hear who wants to read it.
In the days when the chieftains ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah, with his wife and 2 sons, went to reside in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and his 2 sons were named Machlon and Chilion. Ephrathites of Bethlehem in Judah. They came
That's
to
the tribe. They were from the tribe of Ephraim.
Ephrathites, sorry.
Yeah.
They came to the country of Moab and remained there. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah, the other Ruth, and they lived there about 10 years. Then those 2, Machlon and Chilion, also died. So the woman was left with her 2 sons and without her husband. She started out with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab. For in the country of Moab, she had heard that the Lord had taken note of his people and given them food. Accompanied by her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where he'd been living and set out on the road back to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Turn back, each of you, to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. May the Lord grant that each of you find security in the house of her husband." And she kissed them farewell. They broke into weeping. And she said to her, No, we will return with you to your people. But Naomi replied, turn back, my daughters. Why should you go with me? Have I any more sons in my body who might be husbands for you? Turn back, my daughters, for I am too old to be married. Even if I thought there was hope for me, even if I married tonight, and I also bore sons. Should you wait for them to grow up? Should you, on their account, debar yourselves from marriage? Oh, no, my daughters, my lot is far more bitter than yours, for the hand of the Lord has struck out against me. They broke into weeping again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell, but Ruth clung to her.
Okay, so now I'm going to pause there for a little bit of the Hebrew. I want to say something about the Hebrew, okay? And that is that Orpah, the daughter-in-law who isn't Ruth, her name, remember the names are all symbolic. Her name basically means like the back of the neck. It's called the Oref, right? The Jewish people are called Kshe Oref. We are stiff-necked people. And that's in modern Hebrew, it's like the back of the neck. So she eventually does turn her face away and head home. I mean, she stuck it out, and then basically Naomi implored her, and she probably thought, she's right, I should get back to my home. There's not really a future for me. And now when Ruth clung to her, that's a very important word. It says, Verut davka ba. Davka, well, what does that sound like to you? Davka. In modern Hebrew, if you know modern Hebrew, it's glue. But what about in Jewish lore? The dibik, right, is the thing that sticks to you, right? No, that's not a good example. But also we're told of Adam and Eve cleaving. They're stuck together. This is a word of intimacy and really being attached. And we talk about dveikut. That's a spiritual concept. Dveikus or dveikut is the idea of being stuck to God, like stuck on God. When you're really clinging to God and cleaving to God as a spiritual practice, you always have God in your thoughts and in your soul. That's the word that's used. So that is actually very beautiful Hebrew. There definitely is. I'm glad you're doing, like Andrea, the ones that are taking Hebrew, that you're learning the Hebrew of this book, because it's very deep. You know, we're doing the story more in English, but some of the Hebrew is fantastic. Okay, so Ruth clings to her with this word davka. And continue, yeah.
So she said, see, your sister-in-law has returned to her people and her gods. Go follow your sister-in-law. But Ruth replied,
do not urge me to leave you, to turn back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus and more may the Lord do to me, if anything but death parts me from you.
That is, of course, you could say one of the most famous passages in the Bible, right? Whither thou goest, I will go, in the King James, right? Wherever you go, I will go. Whither thou goest, I will go. And it's
I remember the movie.
In the movie, right?
Yeah, 1960. Peggy
2009.
No,
Who played Ruth and
1960.
Naomi?
Peggy Lipton played Naomi, and Alana Eden played Ruth.
Okay. So Ruth said in Hebrew, she says, Ki el asher telchi elech, for wherever you go, I will go. Uva asher talini alin. It's got a nice rhythm in Hebrew. Wherever you sleep, I'm going to sleep. Wherever you lodge, I'll lodge. Amech ami, your people are my people. Your am is my am. The Elohayich Elohai, your God is my God. So I always tell people today are embracing Judaism. Choosing Judaism is not just choosing the religion, right? Your God is my God, but it also means choosing the Jewish people. You have cast your lot with the Jewish people. And in fact, that came first. First, she says, your people are my people, your God is my God. She has thrown her lot with the Jewish people, and that became the model for all converts. Of course, then it doesn't say then she went to the mikveh and she did all these rituals to become Jewish. No, indeed. But, of course, the Midrash will fill that in. But it's simply for her in those days just to say it was enough. Okay, and then continue. And she's like, until death do us part, right? I'm not
Right.
leaving you till death. Okay.
Right. When Naomi saw how determined she was to go with her, she ceased to argue with her. And the two went on until they reached Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole city buzzed with excitement over them. The women said, "Can this be Naomi?" "Do not call me Naomi," she replied. "Call me Mara, for Shaddai has made my lot very bitter. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. How can you call me Naomi when the Lord has dealt harshly with me, when Shaddai has brought misfortune upon me?" Thus Naomi returned from the country of Moab. She returned with her daughter-in-law Ruth the Moabite. They arrived in Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest.
Okay, so just a couple more things. It's seasonal. This is the harvest time and the barley harvest. And this, I think, is part of the identification with our holiday. And also, again, the names. Remember, Naomi meant pleasant. She says, "Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara." Like, what is that? What does a Mara sound like of a word that you know, a Jewish word you know? Maror, right? The bitter. I'm bitter.
Right.
I mean, does she sound a little like a little Jewish mother, a little dramatic? Like, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. But after all, she's really gone through a lot. So, but Shaddai, and Shaddai being one of the older names for God, some people see it as a kind of, I mean, modern women, I'm saying, I think this is a modern interpretation, but Shaddai is related to the words for breasts. Shad is the word for breasts. So was it a goddess word? Was that part of it? Well, I'll leave that to your imagination. I don't know. But you see, again, this imagery of full and empty. There's an emptiness here. Will they ever be fulfilled again? She's had misfortune and she's not afraid to share it. So that's what was one thing that that my friend Rev Simcha Raphael said. One of the ways of coping with grief is not being afraid to share it, not being afraid to articulate it. That she is able to say, "Hey, this is really tough. I'm really bitter. Yeah, you're right. I've changed a lot and I'm not sugarcoating it." So she's able to articulate what she's going through, but then she'll also be open to things getting better later on. And one more thing with the words, what is Bethlehem? Okay, Hebrew students, what is Bethlehem? Bet Lechem. What, Andrew, you want to tell us? Okay.
Of bread.
Bread.
The house of bread. Okay. Okay, so there was a famine and they come to House of Bread. Now I want to show you on the PowerPoint. Sorry, there's a lot of fiddling with stuff here. Okay. I do want to show you a couple of slides of background. Ta-da. All right, let's see. Okay, so not only was Ezra the scribe telling, well, we'll see him in a minute, people should not intermarry, but the Moabites, oh my gosh, Ruth is not just a foreigner, she is a Moabite from the east of the land of Canaan. And what the origin story of the Moabites, it's so not nice. It's in the Torah, and you just feel that this story was written to tell you how degraded the Moabites are. So somebody want to read, this is from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, when Lot and his wife fled the city of Sodom and Gomorrah and with their daughters, and his wife turned into a pillar of salt. Remember that back in the book of Genesis? Well, she turns into a pillar of salt, so just the girls are left with their father. They think he's the only man left on earth, so what are they going to do? They are going to have an, relationship with him and bear children. So that is a bit of a trigger warning, but this is the story in the Torah. Jeffrey, why don't we make you read this, okay? Would you read it? Are you okay?
I can read it, and then I'd like to make a slight addition, if I might.
Okay.
After they flee, several additions. After they flee Sodom and Gomorrah, talking about Lot's daughters, that night also they made their father drink wine, and the younger one went and lay with him. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. Thus the two daughters of Lot came to be with child by their father. The older one bore a son and named him Moab. He is the father of the Moabites of today. And the younger also bore a son, and she called him Ben-Ami. He is the father
of the
Ammonite.
Okay, Jeffrey, you don't have a good connection. We're going to wait till you get a better connection before you add anything to the discussion.
Today. And
yeah.
Mo, the father, I won't.
Oh, that's weird.
We're not hearing you well, Jeffrey. I don't know what's going on. But Moab, of course, means Me'av. He came from dad. And so the Moabites are looked down on already. And then Ruth becomes, the ancestor of King David. How can that be? Well, the rabbis had to say, well, it's a technicality. She's a female Moabite. They're different from the male Moabites. But did you, Jeffrey, maybe put it in the chat what you want? Is that okay?
I'm a horrible typist.
Jeffrey,
okay.
I'm going to get my earphones and see if we can get it.
All right, try that. Yeah.
I have
Meanwhile,
I have a totally nasty edition. Totally nasty.
All right. Well, P.S. Don't marry a Moabite. In addition, the Moabites, you're not allowed to marry Moabites. So somebody want to read this for us? I'm just going to let somebody jump in and read it since I can. Okay,
No
Karen
Ammonite
Norris.
or Moabite shall be admitted into the congregation of the Lord. None of their descendants, even in the 10th generation, shall ever be admitted into the congregation of the Lord, because they did not meet you with food and water on your journey after you left Egypt, and because they hired Balaam to curse you. Deuteronomy 23, 4-5.
Okay, so you can't marry a Moabite anyway. As I said, the rabbis tried to get around that later because obviously somebody married Ruth. She's a Moabite like not a male Moabite. All right, and then it gets, so Karen, let me have you read the next one because this is about Ezra. In general, Ezra the scribe, and my grandson's named Ezra, which Ezra did a lot of great things too, such as instituting the reading of the Torah in public on market days and all kinds of great stuff, but he really had it in for foreign women. He felt that they were watering down the religion, they were raising the children in other religions, and he just didn't have a concept that you could become Jewish. He had people cast them away. So Karen, you want to read this one?
Sure. Ezra the scribe banishes the foreign wives. Then Ezra the priest, who had come back to direct the rebuilding of the temple in the 5th century BCE, got up and said to them, "You have trespassed by bringing home foreign women, thus aggravating the guilt of Israel. So now make confession to the Lord, God of your fathers, and do his will, and separate yourselves from the peoples of the land and from the foreign women." The entire congregation responded in a loud voice, "We must surely do just as you say." So that was from the book of Ezra, chapter 9 and 10.
Yeah, I think that, and if you, it goes into a lot more detail, but just that's sort of the essence of it, that he really was just horrified when he got back from Babylonia to find out that the local Israelites who stayed in the land of Israel had just been intermarrying, and he thought they were losing their religion, and his solution was send away your so-called foreign women. So some people think the book of Ruth was written as a response to this, that the book of Ruth shows a positive view of a so-called foreign woman who's the heroine of the story. Okay, so let's stop the share. Any thoughts from the first chapter or this, what you've seen about this negative attitude toward especially women from the outside?
Can you hear me?
Yes, Jeff. Can we hear you?
All right. When we're talking about Moabites, maybe you said that when it was out of the room, they also get bad press in the Midbar, the book of Numbers, because when the Israelites are encamped, and this is right after Balaam and right before the event where Pinchas stabs two couples who are going.
You know what? We're not hearing you. We're not hearing you. Jeffrey, we're not hearing you, but he's sharing some more unsavory episodes with Moab.
Israel was staying at Shittim
Yeah, it's just not, it's breaking up all the time when
Oh,
you're
it's
talking.
just Well, I should turn this.
Oh. I don't know what to tell you. Okay, Marilyn, did you want to say something? Okay, well, anyway, yeah, I think Jeffrey and I were talking about this the other day, that there's other unsavory things like the Moabite women or Midianite. It's a little unclear, but those foreign women are temptresses. They are leading the pure Israelite men astray and making them have like orgies. And they're just, it's all this idea of the foreign women as a danger. And I think basically this has stayed with us. It's part of the fear of people on the outside. Just as people feared us, we've feared other people too throughout history. I don't know what to tell you, Jeffrey. We're not being able to hear you very well. I'm trying to summarize where I think you're going, but if you could type it in, maybe that would be good. In the next chapter, well, let's go into the next chapter a little bit, and then we'll hear about what happens to get them out of this bad situation. Okay, so once again, I have to fiddle with my screens for just a second, and here we go. Sorry to keep you waiting, but sometimes it just, you know how it is when you're on Zoom and you have to keep positioning everything, right? Well, trust me, it's like that. Okay. So now we're going to go to chapter 2, which is a little bit shorter. Chapter 1 was a bit of setting it up. So somebody like to read chapter 2? Maybe who?
I can do it.
Okay. So let me put it up on the screen and we'll get into chapter 2. There's only 4 chapters, remember, and they're not that long. Okay.
And Naomi had a kinsman on her husband's side, a man of substance, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, I would like to go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain, behind someone who may show me kindness. Yes, daughter, go, she replied. And off she went. And off she went. She came and gleaned in a field behind the reapers, and as luck would have it, it was the piece of land belonging to Boaz, who was of Elimelech's family. Presently, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem. He greeted the reapers. The Lord be with you. And they responded, the Lord bless you. Boaz
can I pause for just a moment there? Just a couple interesting things here. Well, we'll look in a moment what are the gleaners, but the basic idea is that we know the Torah says that if you drop some food while you're out harvesting, you leave it for the poor to come and pick it up. You also leave the corners of the field for them. This is, some kind of social charity and tzedakah and taking care of people. And so one of the people that owns the field is this guy Boaz. He's a, he's a man of wealth, it says, or Gibor Hail. He's a powerful guy in the community. And his name Boaz he's got like strength. And it's interesting that I think that it says, as luck would have it. So I looked at the Hebrew. What is it? Luck would have it. I mean, when does the Torah ever talk about luck, right? And it says, okay. What verse is this on? Luck would have it. Verse 3. Yeah. Sorry. It says, Vayikar Mikrea. There was, or Vayikar Mikrea, it was just happenstance, just luck. The Lord works in mysterious ways, right? And then it says that they greeted each other with the names of the, may Hashem be with you. They said to each other, Vayomer Adonai, they would say Adonai Machem, and they would say Yivarechecha Adonai. God is with you, may God bless you. But they actually used God's 4-letter name. And this was used as an example of, in earlier times, people freely used God's name to bless. That saying, the phrases they used are used in Sephardic synagogues, not with God's 4-letter name, but with the word Adonai when somebody makes an aliyah to the Torah. Okay. Like we say Yasher Koach. All right, continue reading, sorry.
Boaz said to the servant who was in charge of the reapers, whose girl is that? The servant in charge of the reapers replied, "She is a Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." She said, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the reapers. She has been on her feet ever since she came in this morning. She has rested but a little in the hut." Boaz said to Ruth, "Listen to me, daughter. Don't go to glean in another field. Don't go elsewhere, but stay here close to my girls. Keep your eyes on the field they are reaping and follow them. I have ordered the men not to molest you. And when you are thirsty, go to the jars and drink some of the water that the men have drawn." She prostrated herself with her face to the ground and said to him, Why are you so kind as to single me out when I am a foreigner?" Boaz said in reply, "I have been told of all that you did for your mother-in-law after the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother and the land of your birth and came to a people you had not known before. May the Lord reward your deeds. May you have a full recompense from the Lord and the God of Israel, under whose wings you have sought refuge." She answered, "You are most kind, my lord, to comfort me and to speak gently to your maidservant, though I am not so much as one of your maidservants." At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come over here and partake of the meal and dip your morsel in the vinegar." So she sat down beside the reapers. He handed her roasted grain, and she ate her fill and had some left over. When she got up again to glean, Boaz gave orders to his workers, "You are not only to let her glean among the sheaves without interference, but you must also pull some stalks out of the heaps and leave them for her to glean and not scold her." She gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned. It was about an ephah of barley, and carried it back with her to the town. When the mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and when she also took out and gave her what she had left over after eating her fill, her mother-in-law asked her, "Where did you glean today? Where did you work? Blessed be he who took such generous notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law, whom she had worked with, saying, "The name of the man with whom I work today is Boaz." Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not failed in his kindness to the living or to the dead." For Naomi explained to her daughter-in-law, "The man is related to us. He is one of our redeeming kinsmen."
And we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay.
Ruth the Moabite said, "He even told me, stay close by my workers until all my harvest is finished." And Naomi answered her daughter-in-law Ruth, "It is best, daughter, that you go out with his girls and not be annoyed in some other field." So she strayed close to the maidservants of Boaz and gleaned until the barley harvest and the wheat harvest were finished. Then she stayed at home with her mother-in-law.
Okay. And again, this is this time of year, from the barley harvest in the county of the Omer, which is the measure of barley, to the wheat harvest, which is around Shavuot. What did you notice about this story about like the social status and the circumstances of people that would be gleaning in the fields? I mean, feel free to unmute and just pipe up and say something. As Jeffrey's like, not good. It wasn't good. I mean, please speak up if you want
to. Well, the people who worked in the field were not the owners of the field. They were servants, basically.
But as far as those gleaners, yeah, they were, right? Yeah. They're vulnerable. I don't know. The thing just struck me as this idea of Boaz protected her even from the workers and said, don't molest her. Don't harass her. Think of the sexual harassment that women might get, being these poor women, very vulnerable, and just being out there in the field with these guys that are out there working, and he's become her protector, right? Mm-hmm. And let's see. Also, one thing I noticed, well, know some of the motifs of the book. One of the things we're told to look for in biblical stories is like the repeating words and images that you see. So I hinted that you're going to see empty and full. They came back very empty and bereft, and they're beginning to get filled up a little, just even if it's a simple meal of barley bread and vinegar. Very, very simple, but they have something to eat again, right? So they were in a famine, and they're starting to find a little bit of fulfillment. And you can see, I don't know, I see Naomi's antenna going up like, oh, wait, yes, I think you should stay in that guy's field. Aha, oh, praise the Lord, you got to the right field, right? She's definitely doing the Jane Austen thing, right? But also the wings. Did you notice the wings that she has come? Boaz said, you came under the wings of God. Well, Jeffrey, really, I have to credit Jeffrey for alerting me to this imagery of wings. You know that I'm a nature photographer and I love birds spreading their wings. And that's going to be, and my talit has wings. My mother's talit has the wings of the Shekhinah. That's a metaphor we still use when we talk about people becoming Jewish. They've come under the wings of God, like this mother bird. It's also can be a kind of a romantic image because it's like mating birds. And I did have a picture to illustrate that, but then I thought, I'm not going to show you guys, I'll get in trouble. But I have seen, you know, when birds spread their wings as they're mating. All right, we're going to look at something about gleaners and some of the relevant laws. You want us to speak up if you had something you want to say, just jump in and.
Because I want you to hear this.
Okay. What happened to my, all right. We're going to look at the gleaners. Hold on. And it just takes me a while to do everything. There we go. Okay. Can you see the gleaners?
Yeah.
No, what? Okay. This is a artwork of gleaners. And somebody want to read this to us from the book of Leviticus, the laws about gleaning? Anybody want to read who maybe who hasn't read yet?
I'll read.
Okay.
When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I, the Lord, am your God. Leviticus 19:9-10.
Right, chapter 19, verses 9 through 10. And that is from this, the chapter called Kiddush, the Torah portion called Kiddushim, holiness. It's the one that's God, love your neighbor as yourself and all that great stuff. And this is one of the most beautiful mitzvot in the Torah, the idea that we shouldn't feel that even if you own the land, you never really own the land. You're stewards of the land. You must share. You mustn't just clear everything out and grab it all for yourself, but you have to leave the corners for people and leave the what falls for the people. That doesn't mean it was easy. We see this from Ruth's story. And I wanted to ask you guys, can you think of examples in our own town of how we carry out the mitzvah of gleaning? People in our own congregation are doing some things that have to do with the mitzvah of gleaning. And if you can, please unmute and tell us what you do that's a mitzvah of gleaning.
We do food rescue.
Right. Right. Exactly. That we're doing the food rescue. Want to talk about how we do it?
We go to different cafes and Starbucks and little groceries, not grocery stores, but places where you can get, there's a little deli. So places, Surf Bagel.
Yeah.
Gives.
And what do you do with the food?
We take it to Epworth, who has an amazing system that they do so that people who need the food get the food, or they make the food they make meals for people. And yeah, it's what goes on at Epworth is just an amazing thing.
Yeah. Thank you. Lori, did you want to say anything else about that? You're muted, so I don't know if you're saying anything.
Sorry. We also do the food delivery too to the BB hospital people through them.
So I think this is all, yeah, I think these mitzvot that we're doing, or that our congregants are doing, are very much related to this idea of the gleaners, right? And we'll see another relevant, well, it's just, you know, it's so relevant today with the food banks and the gleaning and the wasting of food. It's an environmental priority, it's a social priority, and the idea that people in our very wealthy country find it difficult to get enough food and are food insecure is a very disturbing one. And yet it, you know, it goes all the way back to the Bible and our mitzvot. Now, another mitzvah that's being discussed in a little bit in this chapter, and it's going to come up more in the next chapters, is this what's called Levirate marriage, as I called it, patriarchy in action. A man that having children, even though the woman carries them and bears them, it is carrying on the man's name. You're the son of so-and-so, right? And what happens if a man dies and has no son? Basically his brother would marry the widow if he had no children at all. The wife would be married to, or would have a child with her brother-in-law. I know, Gary, you would want to read before. Do you want to read this one from Deuteronomy 5?
Sure. When brothers dwell together and one of them dies and leaves no son, the wife of the deceased shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall unite with her. He shall take her as his wife and perform the levir's duty. The first son that she bears shall be accounted to the dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out in Israel.
So we're going to kind of see that with Boaz. Boaz is not the brother of these men who died, but he's like a close relative. It seems the book of Ruth seems to take it a little further. And we just have to wonder if that was the practice, was not quite as limited just to brothers. But if a man didn't leave children behind, then you know, his brother would father the child who would be named after him. Now, this is no longer practiced. However, there was a ceremony called chalitza that is still practiced. If this situation happens and a man has no children, we no longer, even the Orthodox don't marry the widow, try to marry her off to the brother-in-law, but they do perform a kind of ceremony to release him from the duty of that he should have done according to the Torah. All right, but in our book of Ruth, it becomes kind of a positive, because again, thinking these women, if they lost their male protector, they didn't have a way to make a living. They're reduced to being gleaners or trying to just live on what people leave behind. And so having someone in the family marry them was seen as a way of protecting them. It wasn't, you know, a romantic idea of marriage, maybe like Jane Austen, but it was a very practical idea of marriage. All right, and do we have anything else? Did you want to say something? No, wait, I have nothing else to share here. What I want to do is share the chapter 3 so we can finish reading the. Okay, yes, sorry. I have so many things so many buttons to press. All right, we're going back into the book of Ruth.
Jeffrey wants to say something, I think.
Jeffrey, go ahead and say something if you can, if we can hear you.
What's that?
Yes.
We just had two people walk in, dear, very, very dear friends, and I was diverted.
Okay.
So what would you like? So I missed what you asked me to do.
Oh, I don't know. We didn't know if you were going to say something, but why don't you go ahead and read chapter 3?
All right.
You sound
sure. Can you, by the way, am I coming in better now?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Fine.
Now.
Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, daughter, I must seek a home for you where you may be happy. Now there is our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to. He will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor tonight. So bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not disclose yourself to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down and go over and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you what you are to do. She replied, I will do everything you tell me. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had instructed her. Boaz ate and drank, and in a cheerful mood went to lie down beside the grain pile. Then she went over stealthily and uncovered his feet and lay down. In the middle of the night, the man gave a jerk and pulled back. There was a woman lying at his feet. Who are you? He asked. And she replied, I am your handmaid Ruth. Spread your robe over your handmaid, for you are a redeeming kinsman. He exclaimed, be blessed of the Lord, daughter. Your latest deed of loyalty is greater than the first, in that you have not turned to younger men, whether poor or rich. And now, daughter, have no fear. I will do in your behalf whatever you ask, for all the elders of my town know what a fine woman you are. And while it is true I am a redeeming kinsman, there is another redeemer closer than I. Stay for the night. Then in the morning, if he will act as a redeemer, good, let him redeem. But if he does not want to act as redeemer for you, I will do so myself as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. So he lay at his feet until dawn. She rose before one person could distinguish another, for he thought, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor. And he said, hold out the shawl you were wearing. She held it back while he measured out 6 measures of barley, and he put it on her back. When she got back to town, she came to her mother-in-law, who asked, how is it with you, daughter? She told him all that the man had done for her, and he added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to me, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And Naomi said, stay here, daughter, till you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today.
Okay, that's chapter 3. Well, you got the good chapter.
Oh, I got the good stuff.
Yeah, we were saying, I was going to ask you.
Do we want to call it the climax, or are we giving something away?
I mean, well, we don't know. I think the beauty of this, like any good romance novel that's really not just a steamy romance novel, is that there's a little ambiguity of what went down there on the threshing floor. But did you notice something about Ruth? And she doesn't just follow what Naomi says to do, right? She says, just go there, lie down, he'll tell you what to do. Ruth has a mind of her own and says, right? She says, give us the words, spread your canopy over you, right?
Let me get my book again.
Yeah. She says, spread your robe over your handmaid. I'm going to show you guys what she says.
That's no accident. She knows her Tanakh.
She knows her Tanakh because, okay, I'm going to show you, I prepared a slide based on what you said.
Oh, you found that Ezekiel quote?
You know me and my slides. Okay. So
all right. It's a good one.
Let's share this. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So spread your mantle. You referred me to the book of Ezekiel. Are you getting the idea about spreading your mantle, what this means? When let's read, I'll read it. This is from the book of Ezekiel, or you could tell us about it a little bit, Jeffrey.
Oh, I'll just read it. It leaves nothing to the imagination.
Don't read the whole chapter, just a little bit.
Oh, no,
like
just the good part.
Okay.
I let you grow like the plants of the field, and you continued to grow up until you attained to womanhood, until your breasts became firm and your hair sprouted. You were still naked and bare when I passed by you again and saw that your time for love had arrived. So I spread my robe over you and covered your nakedness. That's not ambiguous.
Okay, what is that talk? People are going, what? Wait, what? This didn't happen in the book of Ruth. He's reading from the book of Ezekiel.
It's Ezekiel. We're going to talk
chapter
about that
16,
Saturday.
In which God talks to the people of Israel as if they're an abandoned baby girl in the wilderness who's just growing up, feral out in the wilderness, I guess. And when she gets old enough to marry, God comes along and says, let me spread my mantle over you, my robe over you, the talit. That's why I put the picture under the chuppah. You see people sharing the talit under the chuppah as this symbol of marriage, right?
Right, but this is overtly, this leaves nothing to the imagination, put it that way.
Well, I think it leaves a little to the
Ezekiel.
imagination because we really don't know what exactly happened on the threshing floor. She spent the night, but
No, I mean the Ezekiel quote.
Oh, in Ezekiel. Well, that
Yeah.
was, poetic language, kind of strong
Right.
poetic language. But
Right.
so what does it mean spreading the robe? It uses the word kanaf, the same word used in Hebrew to talk about the corner of the garment of the talit. Kanaf, you put the patil techelet, you put the thread of blue on the corner of your garment. It's describing a talit, which was like this big robe that people wore all the time that had the fringes on it, not just the one we wear in prayer. So if you shared your robe with somebody, you were a pair, you're intimate. And it's like the chuppah. It's also people have gotten married like that. It's kind of a kind of chuppah. And what I read that was so interesting is that it comes from a wing, because the birds, as they mate, they spread their wing. The male bird spreads his wings, and so it becomes a symbol of marriage. All right. I have some more. I have a great closing song for that, but wait, we're going to stop sharing
Can
that.
I ask what the significance of uncovering his feet?
Okay.
Was she uncovering more than his ankles?
Well, some scholars think this was a euphemism, that it wasn't just we don't know how much did she uncover. Did she uncover just his feet and sit down on his feet? Did it mean something else? I think the term itself is kind of ambiguous. I mean, you could see this all very innocently, that she just curls herself up at his feet. He wakes up and he's like, hey, like in those movies, again, kind of like these romantic comedies, like, hey, how did you get in my bed, right? Well, this woman is here. What happened? What did I do? I drank some ale and, there's a woman there. But maybe it was all completely innocent, I think, very possibly. Or maybe more happened. Yeah.
I'll give you the non-sexual view. I mean, I've had the fun there. You mentioned Yibum, right? You mentioned Chalitza. Well, the Chalitza process was by which a Levir, a redeemer, renounced his duty to actually marry the person.
That's chapter 4. Okay.
Right. But the Yibum, the process involved the widow making a declaration and taking a shoe of the brother and throwing at him. So there are commentators who believe that by uncovering his feet, meaning feet and not the euphemism, she is reminding Boaz of the duty of a Levir and of the Chalitza ceremony.
Very nice.
Not my original thought, but it works.
So, yeah, it's seems like the women are really planning everything, and Naomi has a whole plan, but Ruth is the one that sees it through, and that she really is like proposes, right? She proposes to Boaz there on the threshing floor in the moonlight.
And by the way, the fact that it is that the Chalitza ceremony and the shoe is discussed in the 4th book,
yes,
it gives some emphasis to the fact that it possibly, that because we know no words in Tanakh are wasted, that it possibly supports that the theory that what Naomi wanted Ruth to do was remind him of Chalitza and of his duty. So it does tie together.
That's so romantic.
Oh, I love it.
I mean, that sounds like a commentator's mind at work. She's going to remind him of right. She's reminding him of halachic
of his duty.
Yeah.
Well, that's that's
but
the
maybe
other
she
theory.
was just cuddling up and seeing,
Well, I like that better too.
Yeah,
but I got to give both sides. I got to give the non-sexual side too.
Yeah,
and that's
or
what
it
it
wasn't
is.
necessarily sexual, but it was romantic. I don't. We don't know what exactly. I think that it's like the scene just goes to black, and we don't know. Exactly.
Right.
And that's part of the beauty of the story. And then he also gives her the 6 measures of barley. So I thought I'd read a little comment on that I found.
Yeah, that's another one.
Okay, first of all, the measures would be giving her a lot. Well, he's putting
huge.
Right, he's putting these grains into her
Oh
robe.
my God.
Now that you could see this is kind of metaphorical, but he hinted to her that there was destined to emerge from her a son who would be blessed with 6 blessings from the book of Isaiah. The messianic blessings, the spirit of wisdom and understanding, counsel and might, the spirit of knowledge and the fear of Adonai. Those describe the messianic ruler who would descend from her. And some say that he really gave her 6 barley corns to allude to 6 righteous men who would blessed with the 6 virtues to descend from their marriage: David, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and the Messiah. So somehow giving her this seed, it all becomes very symbolic. But she's taking it home, and Naomi is happy, but there's still a little tension, right? Because there's another relative who's entitled to marry her, and we don't just marry for romance and for beautiful things in the moonlight and the threshing floor, but we must find out what's going to happen with the other guy. That'll be a little tension. But one other thing you notice about Boaz and Ruth, what do you get about their age from the?
There's a difference.
Right?
There is a
Andrea,
difference.
do you want to say something? Andrea, do you want to unmute and share?
He keeps calling her daughter.
Yes, they're very different in age. Yes, he's quite a bit older.
Right. So was this? Well, I'll just let you think, whatever that means to you, it's part of the story. And of course, in the Midrash, they made it they took even more of the romance out by saying, oh, he was so old, he died right after the wedding.
Yeah.
That really, I don't know. Some of these, the commentators,
It's fun. We were talking today, interestingly enough, about David and Bathsheba, because we're talking about the Davidic succession, and there was a tremendous age difference between those two as well. The older man, younger woman. It's another Tanakh theme.
Okay. Well, maybe we're in the family. I don't know. But here we go. So chapter 4, who has not gotten to read, who would like to read, or only got to read something really short, and you'd like to read chapter 4? Anyone want to jump in and do it?
Muted. I'll do it.
Okay.
Do it. Hello, sweetie.
Meanwhile, Boaz had gone to the gate and sat down there. And now the Redeemer whom Boaz had mentioned passed by. He called, "Come over and sit down here, so-and-so." And he came over and sat down.
Oh, by the way, just to pause, notice the guy doesn't even have a name. He's just Mr. So-and-so. He's not important at all.
Important.
Okay, go ahead.
He's a non-person.
Then Boaz took 10 elders of the town and said, "Be seated here." And they sat down.
Oh, sorry. And by the way, that name, the word for so-and-so, Plony, became in Rabbinic Hebrew like John Doe is Plony. So-and-so. Okay.
He said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, now returned from the country of Moab, must sell the piece of land which belonged to our kinsman Elimelech. I thought I should disclose the matter to you and say, acquire it in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you are willing to redeem it, redeem. But if you will not redeem, tell me that I may know, for there is no one to redeem but you, and I come after you." "I am willing to redeem it," he replied. Boaz continued, "When you acquire the property from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabite, you must also acquire the wife of the deceased, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate." The Redeemer replied, "Then I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own estate. You take over the right of redemption, for I am unable to exercise it." Now, this was formally done in Israel in cases of redemption or exchange. To validate any transaction, one man would take off his sandal and hand it to the other. Such was the practice in Israel. So when the Redeemer said to Boaz, "Acquire for yourself," he drew off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and to the rest of the people, "You are witnesses today that I am acquiring from Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Hilton and Machlon. I am also acquiring Ruth the Moabite, the wife of Machlon, as my wife, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased upon his estate, that the name of the deceased may not disappear from among his kinsmen and from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today." All the people at the gate and the elders answered, "We are. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel. Prosper in Ephratah and perpetuate your name in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife, and he cohabited with her. The Lord let her conceive, and she bore a son. And the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not withheld a redeemer from you today. May his name be perpetuated in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain your old age, for he is born of your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons." Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother. And the woman neighbors gave him a name, saying, "A son is born to Naomi." They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, father of David. This is the line of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Aminadab. Aminadab begot Nachshon. Nachshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse, and Jesse begot David.
Okay. Right back to the patriarchy.
Yeah,
It's like all
well,
those begots, there were never any women involved. It's like they begot, begot,
Right.
begot.
We
Rabbi,
didn't
I
have
have a
any women
question.
to beget anyone.
Yes,
Oh, man.
go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Aida.
My understanding is that what was happening is that Naomi was becoming the foster mother of the child to preserve the Davidic line. But is that because because Ruth hadn't converted? In other words, didn't exist then, and she still was a non-Jew, and you needed to have a Jewish mother for the ancestor to David?
You know, I have to tell you that this just kind of stood out to me, this part about Vatahi. Now I'm going to look at the Hebrew. It says, Vatahi Lola Omenet. She became, I don't know if I'd say foster mother. That's an interesting translation. Maybe she became like its caretaker. She was like the nanny. But let's see if I'm wondering if any of the commentaries, or if anybody's found anything.
well, can I chime in a second?
Yeah.
Thank you. Because we have
yeah.
another thank you. Aida, with her usual perception, is
Yeah.
getting on to something with a non-Jewish ancestor. Because we got another one. We've got a Canaanite woman, and her name is Tamar. And she is referred to, Tamar, who's built up the whole house of Israel. Now that's very interesting in line 12. And may your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Now who is Tamar? She's mentioned along with build up your house like Rachel and like Leah. Who is Tamar? Where does she come in? Well,
Jacob's 4 wives.
What's that? Well, I know you know.
One of Jacob's 4 wives.
Well, she is Judah's. Yeah, that's right. Tamar was, I'm trying to think of it. Tamar was actually married to 2 of the sons of Judah. And guess what happens to the 2 of them? One of them is the nefarious Onan. They die and they leave Tamar without issue. We heard it. Does that sound a little bit familiar? And remember, so Judah, of course, is the son of Jacob. And we know that the scepter will not depart from Judah, that Judah is the ancestor of the house of David. But here, poor Tamar is left with 2 children, with 2 dead children. And there's a 3rd son she can marry, but he's a baby. So she's got to do something about it. So what does she do? She disguises herself as a sacred prostitute, goes out on the road, and seduces her father-in-law, Judah. Now, she's smart enough to ask Judah, before, when he finishes, to give me your signet ring as a token. So, of course, when Tamar returns, she gets pregnant. Judah's ready to burn her at the stake. She pulls out the ring and the signet, and she shows, hey, this, you're going to burn me. We got the father here. So sometimes the men do get their comeuppance. Her child she gives birth to 2 twins, and one of whom is Peretz. and the two twins are fighting each other in the womb. They come out, they're kind of like Jacob and Esau. And this is the parrots. When you read the genealogy here, the son of Tamar, that is the parrots that is mentioned. So we have two things going on. One, we have sexual trickery, as we do with the Moabites and so forth. So that's another possible allusion, a rather infamous event. And number two, we got another non-Jewish ancestress for the house of David. And it's all tied together right here with a reference to Tamar and this particular genealogy. And if you go back to Genesis 38, the last lines of that, it all fits like a glove.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it for me tonight.
Thank you. I asked if you would share some addendums to the story, especially when you get into the genealogy. So I guess I'd like to explore that further, but I think it's basically, it's her lineage. We saw the wives of Rachel and Leah, when they can't have children of their own, other women, they have like surrogate mothers giving birth, these maidservants, and then it becomes like their child. They claim the child. Now, why is it that way with Naomi and Ruth? It's like she's this child, like her sons who are lost are kind of being replaced for her in that baby. That's how I kind of see it.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, the more classical commentators are saying she knew that child would be that messianic lineage, and she sees that, that's a fulfillment, but also see it as just in the sense like she lost her sons and now she's getting a son in this with the birth of her grandson. But I don't know, but
it keeps the line alive. I mean, in a certain
right.
effect,
And what's Ruth? What has Ruth got to do with it? I don't know. Again, it's like it goes to the end of the. If you look at the beginning, I'm trying to think what's the story. See, this is what happens to me when I study past 9 o'clock at night. That there's another example of using a completely patriarchal lineage and then having the women kind of assert themselves. But really, the story ends with this completely patriarchal line, right? After we had seen the women in action. And that takes you to King David, who is seen as the messianic ruler. I don't know if Eric is Eric. Yeah, Eric, if you had some thoughts about this, because you spent so much time learning about King David.
No, I don't think I have anything else to add on it. I mean, it's pretty clear that in the Tanakh, David is in that direct lineage of Ruth, and it was born to Jesse. So yes.
And Tamar and Judah.
If you go all the way back, right?
You got to, because that's what it does.
Right.
The scepter will not depart from Judah.
Right.
We've got to get right back to the legitimacy and the importance of the Davidic covenant. You have to go right back to Judah, because Jacob says the scepter will not depart from Judah, and they're the rightful kings. And then that's why you have this plug-in.
And all that's also very polemical, because of course there was a struggle between the house of Saul and the house of David, and that goes all the way through the book of Esther with Queen Esther. It's kind of like the revenge of Saul's family.
All right, who won the Wars of the Roses? Richard Henry in the House of Lancaster. Read Shakespeare. The winners write history. And this is another good, and David shaking his head. We got a terrific historian right here. And that's exactly what happens here. The winner, the House of David, won the struggle, and they wrote the history, and here it is.
And the example I was just trying to think of that I was having trouble remembering but it's from the very beginning of the book of 1 Samuel, that when you read the story of Hannah, it starts out with her husband's genealogy,
Right.
and it goes through only through the male line, but then it goes into the story of the woman.
Right.
I think that Jewish history and Jewish literature a lot of times has been like that. It's been the man's world, and then the women assert themselves, and then they kind of forced into the background again. And even I don't know, Naomi though certainly comes out triumphant through her helping orchestrate her daughter-in-law's marriage, and then having a grandson. And I don't know, we just had a grandson, so I don't know. I definitely feel like it's not my grandson, and I'm glad that the mom gets to raise him. But I thought if anybody who's a grandma had any perspective on this, we'd like
Mazel
you to
tov.
share. Yes, so now that we've looked at all these, we've gone through the whole book, I'd like to wrap it up by, well, I have a special video to wrap it up, but first, before we do that, I wanted to just ask you to remember the ways that I said we could look at the book. And okay, no, that's not what I want to show you. Can you see ways to look at the book of Ruth? Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Which of those spoke to you as we read it? Or was there another way you saw this book?
All of the above.
Well, yeah.
All of the above.
I was a little almost disappointed in the women's agency aspect of it. So in the very beginning, I would have said, why, when you were asking why you do this, I've never read the book of Ruth, or I know of Ruth, the character, as being this symbol of strength and wisdom and power for women. But didn't really know the story, didn't know the Bible story. And while there's some initial aspects of her actions to, that she's taking on her own, the rest of the book, she's doing what Naomi says. Chapter 4, the two men decide who's going to acquire her. It's not as it's not 21st century women's agency.
Well, that's for sure. But would anybody else like to counter that? Did you see Ruth acting on her own in any ways, or was she just kind of a pawn, doing what she was told? Did you notice that she took things into her own hands at any times?
She does.
She didn't want to give us examples.
Well,
She leaves her family and what's familiar to go, to follow.
I think when she was gleaning, I think she was very impressed by Boaz and his generosity and his kindness to her. So my feeling is she probably figured he was the best option for her. I don't think she went into this unwillingly.
Yeah. I think she definitely, I would see her as a lot more than a pawn. I mean, because she did make the decision to stick with Naomi.
Right.
And to cleave to her. Now, what's the nature of their relationship? Again, I'll just say some people have looked to the David and Jonathan story as a prototypical, male love story. And some see the Ruth and Naomi story as a female love story. And that's people that want to look at a queer lens at the Bible. You could look at it that way. You don't have to look at it that way, of course. But this Naomi, for whatever reason, for loyalty, for love, maybe her own mother wasn't so great, I don't know, but she really is loyal to Naomi. That's her decision. And then when she goes out to glean, she clearly is a very hard worker and very generous and dedicated. Doesn't just do the minimum. She saves her lunch. She eats, but she saves for her mother-in-law. And she does seem to, she notices Boaz, as Marilyn said. And then remember that Naomi gave her instructions what to do on the threshing floor, but she went above and beyond. She basically proposed to Boaz. So I think she does show agency, but of course it's not at all. It's not a modern liberated woman at all. It's a very, very patriarchal society. Interacting at the gate and the women have to act behind the scenes, just similar to the book of Esther. Of course, that was in a royal court, but women were in the same boat, whether they were royal or they were gleaners. Yeah.
I think we have to be careful that we don't get involved in this historicity situation where we start applying our own modern visions of the world to what
Let's mute. Please mute if you're not talking.
Hey, where's
Thank you, David. Yeah, I think, of course, we're looking at stories from very long ago. historicity is still doubtful, of course, in anything we read. In the Bible, we don't know exactly. There's some kernel of history. But anyway, but still, of course, if we're looking, Gary, I think you're right that if we're looking to the Bible to find some satisfying role models for women of today, well, you can say Deborah, you can say Miriam, you can see this, but women are still in the world they were in then. And, and I guess that's the role of Midrash. Midrash tells you the backstory. Midrash fills in, someone called it the fan fiction of the Bible. And we can make new Midrashim and retell the stories in dramatic and creative ways. I wanted to conclude with sharing a beautiful Hebrew poem that became a favorite song of mine, and it has to do with the wings and bringing me under your wings. But in this case, it's a man saying it to a woman, and it's from the poetry of Chaim Nachman Bialik, who was the poet laureate of Israel. And let me just see if I've got the words. Okay. The translation of it is, it's Achnisini tachat knafech, take me under your wing. Take me under your wing, be my mother, my sister. Take my head to your breast and my banished prayers to your nest. One merciful twilight hour, hear my pain, bend your head. They say there's youth in the world, where has my youth fled? Listen, another secret, I've been seared by a flame. They say there's love in the world, how do we know love's name? I was deceived by the stars, there was a dream it passed. I have nothing at all in the world, nothing but a vast waste. Take me under your wing, hachnisini tachat knafech. Be my mother, my sister, take my head to your breast, my banished prayers to your nest. Translators Ruth Neveau from Chaim Nachman Bialik, a poem he wrote in 1931, but it was set to music, to beautiful music, and it was a very popular song when I was young. And I love it so much with Arik Einstein, this very famous Israeli singer who became kind of a symbol of the good old days, I guess, in Israel. And I wanted to share this poem, Take Me Under Your Wing, as a new, kind of, wait a second, I want to make sure I'm sharing the sound. Just a moment. So that, okay, here it goes. So I found it on YouTube, guys, and that's what I want. So this was Under the Wing, Taking You Under the Wing. And here it is, Take Me Under Your Wing, sung by Arik Einstein. Wave if you can hear it when it goes on. Can you hear it? Wait, are you having trouble hearing it? Okay, hold on. All right. Sometimes I want to go crazy with Zoom. 1 second. I'm turning my.
Yeah, if you could turn the volume up on it at all, that would be.
Okay. I'm going to try. I think that's as high as I can make it go. So listen really loud and you'll hear it. Okay. It'll get louder as we go.
He doesn't look like a hippie.
אומרים יש בעולם נעורים, היכן נעוריי, הכניסיני תחת כנפך, והיי לי אם ואחות, ויהי חיקך מקלט ראשי, כן תפילותיי לך אתוודה נפשי נשרפה בלהבה אומרים אהבה יש בעולם מה זאת אהבה הכניסיני תחת נפך והי לי אם ואחות ויהי חיקך מקלט ראשי כן תפילותיי הנידחות הכוכבים רימו אותי היה חלום אך גם הוא עבר עתה אין לי כלום בעולם אין לי דבר אך ניסיני תחת נפך והי לי אם ואחות ויהי חיקך מקלט ראשי כן תפילותיי הנידחות הכניסיני תחת אם ואחות ויהי חיקך מקלט ראשי כן תפילותיי הנידחות
Well, it goes on. I can go on. It's only 5 minutes long, but if you want, I'll put the. That's one of my favorite old Israeli songs, and I was telling Avram that's how I learned Hebrew. I wanted to know what all the lyrics meant, and it's very difficult Hebrew. It's fancy Hebrew, but hachnisini, put me under tachat knafech, under your wings. And be like my mother and sister. He says, Vahili em ve'achod, be my mother, be my sister. It's an interesting reversal of the Boaz being the protector and putting his wings over Ruth. Anyway, Evie, did you want to add something? Unmute. I can't hear you.
The first time I went to Israel was in 1971, and the group we were with, we got to go to Arik Einstein's concert. And the first thing I did when I came back to America was buy his record. My uncle, who lived in Haifa, was very, very conservative, and I was very excited about hearing Arik Einstein. And my uncle was absolutely mortified. He said, "You went to a concert?" He used to call him the Hashishnik.
Well, I mean, he became an icon in Israel. No one would look at him like that today. And he just passed away like in the past couple of years, I guess. And people looked at it as the end of an era, really, with his music is very touching, very famous. But yeah, Aida, did you want to share something?
Yeah, the imagery of the wing is very interesting because there is a saying in Spanish about Cuba and Puerto Rico that they're two wings of the same bird. And it's beautiful in Spanish. In English, it sounds terrible, but the idea is two peoples are so closely knit together that they're part of the same body.
Well, I find the nature imagery so interesting, and I just have to again thank Jeffrey because it really went past me. This idea of spread your cloak. I'm going to look this up, and it said kanaf. I'm like, oh, that's like the talit. How interesting! And then I was seeing the commentator said, oh, it's like a wing, and these birds mating. I'm like, this is things I'm seeing all the time in nature. The birds spreading their wings, and that's also seen as a image of as it said, you came under the wings of the Shekhinah, Ruth. You're under the divine protection, and God bore us on eagle's wings, and well, etc. You know, I've got that right here. My eagles, pictures that I take. Did you see it? The eagle, the birds that I take pictures of. So I think the nature imagery is really beautiful and special. And we were seeing on Israeli TV about the doves of the Kotel, the Western Wall. It's a unique habitat for doves to nest in, you know, and the divine presence is seen like a dove hovering over the Western Wall. So maybe that's a very beautiful thing to consider. So as we go, I'd just be interested as we conclude, anything you're taking away from the book of Ruth, any lesson of how to be more Ruthful in a ruthless world. And what would you study all night if you studied? There are like a traditional text where you do a little from each book of the Bible, and then each section of the Mishnah and the Talmud. It's like, if you're one of those people that really wants to do it the right way, remember it's a custom that only goes back like merely 500 years. but that's not done by everybody. Some synagogues just have an array of speakers and lessons and things going on all during the night, and then, you know, some people have added things to keep you awake, like yoga, and, you know, there's food is served, and you might meet somebody. Maybe you'll meet your Ruth or your Boaz, you know, if you go to the synagogue, if it's a modern Orthodox, I don't know.
At our synagogue in Maryland, we had, there was a trivia segment, there were study sessions.
Oh, fun.
In the middle of the night, we often watched a movie.
Wow, that's cool that you did that.
You know, with a Jewish theme, like the first.
I think it's become more popular in recent years. I think it's one of these things that's kind of made a comeback. I got so much background noise.
I attended one in Israel at the Pardes Institute. And in the morning, we studied all night. We heard from some marvelous speakers. And in the morning, as the sun rose, we all walked to the Kotel.
Nice.
Through the gate. It is the most overpowering spiritual experience I've ever had in my life.
Well, that's
what Shavuot in Israel.
I was reading that it's really not even so much about the content as about the experience of getting a kind of
unbelievable
of having a vision quest, sort of, that you stay up all night, you get in a different frame of mind, and then be there as the sun's rising. That could be very.
And what we did at our home synagogue and still is we would say Shachrit in the morning.
Right. You say
so to do Shachrit after being up all night and discussing, again, totally indescribable.
Sounds really good. I'm not going to
amazing. And then in my youth, I'd go to sleep for an hour and go to work. But that was
when
then,
you're young, you
now.
ought to be young.
Oh yeah.
So but anyway, sorry, I interrupted myself. I do that all the time. But are you coming away with a kinder, gentler world? Because, you know, patriarchy aside, of any lessons from the book of Ruth that we could take with us, or that you're taking with tonight? The Shavuot. Andrea, do you have a thought? Yeah. Unmute.
Yes. I like the empty and fullness. I think that you know, we're just starting this, but
in Hebrew.
I'm going to be looking for that, for all of those things.
And look, as you do it you might even go through like Sepharia, where they'll show you where there's parallel text, like as I point out in chapter 1, like that word dafka flung to her, that was also Adam and Eve. What, you know, where else in the Bible does it talk about use that?
That's great.
In Jewish lore, does that word appear? What if people heard this in an oral culture? What would be the resonances for them, and so forth? That's great.
Well, I thank you very much for this.
Welcome, and thank you all for coming and staying up so late. It's like almost 10 o'clock. You're getting
we
at
can
least
handle
several
that.
points. Go, you know, you feel like you were up all night. I feel like I was already. Thanks for being here. All right, have a
beautifully done.
Bye-bye.
Yasher Koach to everybody.